Consent management and Salesforce. How do I do it? My name is Saurabh Gupta, founder and CEO of Cloud Compliance, the most comprehensive native app exchange data privacy suite. This presentation is not legal advice. It does not reflect Salesforce's official point of view. This presentation is my personal opinion. Let's start by talking about consent, also known as communication preferences. Within GDPR and CCPA, consent has a specific purpose, i.e., why are we doing it? It has to be for a specific channel, such as email, phone, SMS, etc. And a consent has to have a robust auditability around it. When it was taken, what purpose and channel it was taken for, what channel was the consent taken over, what is the expiration date of this consent, and so on and so forth. Salesforce helps customers meet their consent related obligation by using 17 standard objects. These have been introduced in the last 2-3 years by Salesforce and reflect the commitment of the platform towards data privacy. In addition to that, Salesforce offers some sample code and lightning flows, template, etc. that customers can use to try and build their own solution around it. Finally, Salesforce also offers a consent REST API that can be used for programmatic integration to determine what kind of consent a particular person has. So let's talk a little bit more about the 17 standard objects that Salesforce offers. These objects allow a remarkable amount of granularity in terms of consent management. And because these are just records and objects, they are audit ready. The other thing that Salesforce has done that is really great is that the storage in these objects is not counted in your org's data limits. When you think about the sheer number of consents that a medium-sized business may have, the storage for these can become quite significant very quickly. Finally, some of these objects are API only. And what that means is that if you wanted to add or modify the picklist values for, say, contact point type consent, that's not possible from the UI. Let's now talk about the individual object. Of the 17 objects, this is perhaps the most important object and central to Salesforce's strategy for data privacy and consent management. Think of individual object as the representation of a natural person, or as GDPR calls it, a data subject. Individual object serves as the top level object for leads, users, contacts, person accounts, etc. What that means is that you can have the same person twice, once maybe as a lead and once as a contact, but you would only have one individual object record for that person. This approach enables individual to then connect with multiple consent. So you now have multiple representations of the person under lead, user, contact, person account, etc. connected to one individual record, which in turn connects to multiple consents. It's a very master data management style approach, but it really helps us as a customer of Salesforce because we can now be certain that we are not going to have duplicated consents across leads, contacts, users, and such. Individual object is also very central to Salesforce's idea because as we expand into consent in every other aspect, we see that individual is the linchpin to all of that functionality that Salesforce has built or is probably building as we move forward. The other commonly used objects include contact point type consent, data use purpose, and authorization form consent. Let's start with contact point type consent. This object basically records the consents that have been given by an individual. So whether it's an opt-in, opt-out, or an expired consent, all of those records are here. Related to the contact point type consent record is data use purpose. As the name suggests, data use purpose has the referential fields for all the purposes for which consent has been obtained and recorded in contact point type consent. In addition to that, data use purpose also has the channel for which this consent was obtained. Finally, We have the authorization form consent set of objects. These objects store a proof of acceptance for terms and conditions, privacy statements, etc. So, with these 17 objects, Salesforce offers a remarkable degree of granularity and flexibility for customers. Let's now visit the idea of effective consent design. It's no secret that a number of regulatory and compliance initiatives are not super popular with end users. Unfortunately, the user experience of a number of systems that I have seen tends to become an impediment in the day to day functioning of a person. We need to make sure that our design addresses that issue. To be really usable, a good consent design will ensure that it shows appropriate consent at point of action and drives a behavior that is consistent to compliance policies and data privacy. In addition, an effective consent design will be able to evolve with requirements as data privacy regulatory changes happen and our business needs change. Finally, an effective consent design can align with Salesforce's out of box objects. This ensures that we benefit from new features as Salesforce releases them. Cloud compliance is built on this philosophy. Now let's take a look at how do we do it. We begin by creating individuals, and then we create corresponding consents, and finally we enable consent usage across various channels, across marketing for internal and external users. Essentially, cloud compliance automates all of these tasks. Let's talk a little bit more about how we can create and match individuals. We begin by first scanning contacts, leads, person accounts, etc. We also try to look if there are common identifiers and if there is an overlap between contacts and leads. For example, if the same person exists as both contacts and leads, we only want to create one individual record for it and link it to the corresponding contact and lead. By doing this process, we eventually create unique individual records across our contact, lead, person account, user ecosystem. And the intention is that these unique individuals can then be linked to consent. So the first two steps here of scanning contact leads and creating or linking individual really cover a data migration aspect because these apply to our current set of contacts and leads. But as we move forward and new contacts and leads get created, we need some automation on an ongoing basis, either in real time by using triggers, etc., or through some sort of a scheduled mechanism so that we can generate individuals, we can do matching on existing individuals for every new contact and lead that is getting created. If you think about the effort on this, it is somewhere between 3 to 6 weeks or more, depending on how complex your org is. This whole capability of creation and matching of individuals is pre-built in cloud compliance. Now let's look at creation and maintenance of consent. We begin by setting purpose in channel. This is typically done in collaboration with sales, marketing, legal, compliance, and other stakeholders. And the idea is to identify what purposes and channels do we need to have consent for. Once we understand this, we can set this up in Salesforce. Eventually, we create and link consents for all of the corresponding individuals that were created. So now what we have in our ecosystem is that for every unique natural person, we have an individual record that is linked to corresponding contact, lead, person account, etc. For each of these individuals, we now have consent. We may need to write some logic that looks at existing leads and contacts and the do not call, do not email type classic fields from Salesforce, and then use that to find the corresponding individual and create appropriate consents for them. This takes care of our existing data set of leads, contacts, and other personal data objects. However, in addition to this, We also need some automation on an ongoing basis so that every new lead and contact that gets created, we are able to automatically create the individual and consent records for it. A great example of this is a lead registration form on your website. So when someone comes and fills that, and if you ask for specific consents there, we now need an automation to ensure that all of these records get created, the individual and the consent as well. Depending on the complexity, this could be 2 to 4 weeks of custom development or more. We offer this pre-built in cloud compliance so that our customers are able to easily automate creation of individual as well as generation of consents for them. Once we have the individual and consents, the next step is to enable consent management for our internal users. Again, the emphasis here is on an excellent user experience that ensures compliance and prevents any variance from the preferences that the customer or the consumer or the data subject has made. We do this by highlighting the consents on the lead, contact, and other records. We then also want to ensure that there is an easy user interface for creating opt in or opt out type consents so that when the sales or the call center or the other user type is interacting with the customer, they can ensure that if a customer makes certain requests, we are able to create corresponding opt in, opt out for specific purposes and channels. Finally, we really need to make sure that we have alerts that are at the point of action. If we are calling someone, we need to know from an alerting perspective that it is okay to call them, and so on and so forth. Again, depending on how sophisticated this implementation is, it may take 2 to 4 weeks of custom development or more. In cloud compliance, we offer this pre-built, and here is an example of what that user experience looks like. So you see here a lead record and a consent tab on that lead record. What you also see is that an individual is already linked to this lead record. It's a hyperlink, so you could go and look up more information on this individual if you so need to. In addition, there is a very clear point of action alert, which tells us that it is not okay to contact this customer via SMS for customer support. We also see an easy UI to create opt-in and opt-out. An end user can just click on any of these buttons under phone customer support, for example, and change the opt-in to opt-out if that's the request they get from the customer. They can also click on the gray buttons for missing and create a consent which is specific for that particular channel for that particular purpose with a clear from and to date. This UI is very easy to expose on lead, contact, person account, etc., and ensures that we have a robust consent management design that allows our users to stay compliant and maintain and manage opt-ins and opt-outs with ease. The next step is to enable consent management for externals such as customers, consumers, partners, etc. And this boils down to 3 steps. The first is to have a self-service request site for CCPA requests or for GDPR's data subject access requests, commonly known as DSARs. The intention here is that anyone can go and read up our privacy policy, terms and conditions, data practices, etc. And if they have a question or a request, they can make it from the website. These requests typically could be updating consent preferences or right to be forgotten or data portability, etc. The second step here is to integrate all of these consents that we have obtained and maintained with our marketing automation. So typically customers who have Marketing Cloud, Pardot, Marketo, Eloqua, MailChimp, Constant Contact, or any other such system, they would want to leverage these consents to make sure that their outbound communication and marketing is compliant and respectful of customers' preferences on what purposes they want to be communicated for and through which channels. Finally, these marketing tools can embed a managed consent link. Think of this link as the superior version of unsubscribe functionality. And the idea here is that the person who receives this outbound communication can click the consent link, they can be redirected to the DSAR CCPA request site, and they can manage and maintain their preferences or consents on that page. By doing this, we effectively close the loop on self service and ensure that a data subject is able to actively and effectively exercise their data rights, and we can enable this sort of functionality rather inexpensively through a self service mechanism. Depending on how complex this is, it could be 6 weeks or more of custom development. We offer this functionality pre-built in cloud compliance, so our customers can enable a self-service site and they can also integrate with marketing and send out a managed consent link. Here is an example of how that looks like. This is the web page that a customer gets when they click a link in an email. They can manage their consent here, they can read the privacy policy, etc. This is also responsive, so you can manage and maintain your consent on a mobile page as well. Another important area to consider here is security. You may want to send an email with an encrypted link that expires after some time. That's the approach we have taken. So when our customers get an email, they click the link. If the link is within the time frame that is being customized and set, then they're able to get to this page. If the link has expired, we send them another link and they're able to log in. That way, we are able to ensure that if this email was inadvertently forwarded or something else happened, that the exposure from a managed consent perspective is somewhat limited and contained. This is again part of our self-service user interface that's pre-built in cloud compliance. Let's now look at how we enable consent-based marketing. It really breaks down into three areas. When marketeers create marketing campaigns, they are now able to filter the leads and contacts who will be targeted based on their consents. Now, depending on the marketing technology that you're using, you may be able to do one of the two things. Some marketing tools, and I believe Pardot is one of them, are able to navigate from contact or lead up to the individual and to the related consent records. This ensures that they can build filters which are based on consent and be compliant with customers' preferences and data privacy regulations. For certain other marketing automation tools, they do all of their filtering based on lead or contact fields. In those cases, you would need to write some sort of a propagation logic to pull the active consents, the opt-ins, the opt-outs, and take some of those values down to a contact or a lead record level and filter it from there for every marketing campaign and outbound communication that's happening. In addition to this, by embedding the marketing link, we now ensure that we are very compliant to the privacy regulations as well as to the communication preferences that our customers have indicated. Depending on the technology that you have in house for marketing, this could be a 2 week or more of custom development effort. This capability and the propagation logic for filtering based on consent is pre-built in cloud compliance, and our customers can configure and use it fairly easily. I want to reiterate something in all of this conversation. The idea that despite of all of this development and a bunch of objects and all the other things that have to happen, consent management within Salesforce is still an excellent fit in an enterprise. It's still fit for purpose because Salesforce is the CRM. It's also a great option because it is easy to deploy. Most organizations already have a deployment, they've gone through user adoption, and all the other major areas of challenge with any large technology deployment are less pronounced for an existing Salesforce customer. In addition to this, it becomes lower cost because it's riding on the economies of scale and scope of a Salesforce implementation. And again, the integration benefits immensely because of pre-built integration with Salesforce for marketing technologies, lead integration, so on and so forth. So what do you do next from here? A number of customers would probably ignore this and wait from a data privacy perspective. This sort of a wait and watch approach may work, but there is a risk that you may lose customer trust if something inadvertent happens. In addition, there is also an exposure to penalty from non-compliance of consent management, etc. Your other option is to build it in-house. As we mentioned, Salesforce offers an incredibly great set of tools and capabilities to build upon. But as our breakup of various activities looks like, this could be a 15 plus weeks of development. You also run into the classic challenge of a bit of uncertainty with configuration and custom development because there is much to be researched and figured out. There are some non-trivial areas like migration and creation of individual and consent and such. Your third option is to leverage a tool like Cloud Compliance. We can configure most of what we showed in consent management in about 2 weeks, depending on your implementation and its complexity. The one benefit of this is also that you can take a very try before you buy approach and ensure that you're not committing significant amount of resources and money to a solution that you're not convinced with. I hope this was useful. Our next conversation will focus on right to erasure or deletion, also infamously known as right to be forgotten. My name is Saurabh Gupta. I'm the CEO and founder of Cloud Compliance, a native Salesforce App Exchange package which offers the most comprehensive data privacy capabilities on App Exchange. Thank you so much for watching.